Hi, this is Fish and welcome to Fish Picks. Today I'll be sharing with you the roller coaster ride I've gone through this week while attempting to open this vintage lock. So let's get started. For those of you who have already watched episode 33, you may recall that I featured this as one of the locks that I was gifted by US lock sporter Pix, who sent this without a key and with an enigmatic note which simply read, "Close shackle and enjoy." I knew nothing about this kind of lock, and so I asked the community to let me know in the comments section how I should go about working with it, and you didn't let me down. I've come to learn that this is a 6-lever lock, and given that it has no maker's marks, we can assume that it's likely to be a generically mass-produced model. Given that the lock was showing signs of corrosion, I decided to start by doing a little restoration work so that the mechanism was as likely to be free from rust as possible. To that end, I first placed the lock in a vinegar bath. Most household vinegar provides a solution of acetic acid which has about a 6 to 8% concentration, providing a mild treatment that won't strip away the lock's patina. Now in this case I left it soaking overnight, agitating the jar every few hours and scrubbing the surface of the lock with a soft bristled toothbrush to remove any loose flakes. And then I rinsed it in warm soapy water, dried it off and inspected the results. The lock was certainly looking a lot better, but some persistent rust remained, and I suspected that this would also be the case inside the lock body, so I decided to apply a second overnight chemical bath, this time using several spoonfuls of citric acid powder, which I dissolved into hot water to accelerate the reaction. Citric acid is also used in food preparation and can be dispensed with after use by just pouring it down the sink, and it has the added advantage that it will help clean any blockages in your plumbing. I did, however, use latex gloves when handling this solution because it is stronger than the vinegar and can cause skin irritation. To neutralise the effects of the acid, I dipped the lock into a tub of water with a couple of spoonfuls of baking soda and then finished the restoration by applying a liberal coating of lock oil to protect it from further corrosion. So I now had a decent starting point to begin working on the lock, and keen to follow Pic's advice, I snapped the spring-loaded shackle shut and started to think about how I might go about opening it again. And this was a rookie error. In hindsight, what I should have done was fashion a turning tool and work the levers each in turn whilst it was open to get a sense of specifically what I needed to do to affect the levers. Instead, I now had to work blind and would spend more than 10 hours over the next few days without making very much progress at all. From researching other approaches to picking lever locks, I knew that I could tension the lock by placing upward force on the shackle, although because this model is spring-loaded it might already have been under sufficient tension. I also knew that I'd need to be able to manipulate the two sets of levers from the top and the bottom of the keyway because the shackle is locked in place by two opposing directions of force. These levers then exhibit a binding order, so I'd need to be able to work on each lever independently until all 6 were released. Given this knowledge, I first got hold of some copper-coated steel wire that I found in my school's design and technology workshop, and I bent them into a simple frame before using some heat-moldable plastic granules to fashion a thumb and finger grip. I made a couple of these, flattening the tips using a hammer and an anvil, and then adjusting the length to fit the keyway using a mini lathe. The problem was, I had no idea whether I was effectively working on the levers, nor how much tension would be needed to cause them to release. At times I felt some movement in the shackle, and I heard some encouraging clicks, but as time went on, it became clear that the wire I was using was too soft, and I suspected too thin, and the tools became bent until I had to go back to the drawing board. This time I recruited the help of one of my colleagues in the school where I teach, Ed Can, who's an omnicompetent craftsman and makes anything from jewellery to furniture with real attention to detail. I explained my struggle to Ed, and he helped me to fashion a turning tool from thicker steel rod, which I then ground down at home to fit the keyway. In the meantime, Ed made this beauty from hardened copper wire using silver soldering to create something that looked like it should be studded in semi-precious stones rather than jammed into an old lock mechanism. It's so pretty that I still can't bring myself to grind the tip, but I'm sure I'll use it in a future project. Armed with my new turning tool, I went back to my picking and I spent another 5 hours without seeming to make any further progress. This time the tool held its shape, but I couldn't tell what was going wrong. Given that the lock was an eBay purchase, it could have a broken mechanism, in which case I'd never be able to open it. Or it might be that the tip of the tool wasn't allowing me to engage each lever independently, and I wouldn't know unless I opened it up and took a look at what was going on the inside. While I was reluctant to cut it open, I couldn't see a better option, and so Ed helped me to cut a Perspex backing for the lock so that I could reassemble it and then work the mechanism while seeing the picking process in real time. So it would now just be a case of grinding off the rivets and then replacing them with this new see-through backing. But the strangest thing happened. While Ed was programming the laser cutter to produce the Perspex cutout, I was fiddling with the lock and turning tool and it just popped open. After 15 hours of work in a vise at home, I opened it in a couple of minutes in my hand without really paying very much attention to what I was doing. But I had proven it was possible. Given this breakthrough, I decided not to cut the lock open, but to spend a little time studying how the pick interacted with the levers, and then decided to close the shackle and work on being able to open it again, hopefully this time in less than 15 hours. I now had a better idea of what was going on inside the mechanism and the specific depth and position I needed to hold the tool to work each lever. It turned out that I had the most success when I anchored the tool right up against the centre point of the keyway, and I also learned to press my fingertip against the face of the lock so that I could more precisely slide the pick in and out as I moved from one lever to the next. I applied light upward pressure on the shackle and spent less time trying to force the open and more of my focus instead on listening to what the lock was trying to tell me. This seemed to be a lesson I have to learn and relearn as I progress in lock sport, and perhaps it's something that I'd benefit as a life lesson learning too. More often than not, the precise and skillful application of knowledge will trump brute force and ignorance. This time I managed to secure the open in about 5.5 minutes, and given the struggle it had taken to arrive at this point, it was probably one of my proudest achievements so far in this amazing pastime that we share. So there you have it. Thanks again to Pix for sending me this lock, to Ed for his invaluable help, and to all of you for continuing to support the channel. And until next time, take good care.